started like any other Thursday morning. The kids were running wild, half-dressed and demanding breakfast, while Claire, my wife, flitted around the kitchen multitasking like the pro she was. I was busy packing lunches, but the chaos was routine, familiar, comforting even. Or at least it used to be. Then my phone buzzed. Now I get texts and work emails all the time. Being the lead tech consultant for a pretty big firm means I'm never really off the clock. But this message was different. It wasn't meant for me. The sender was unknown, and the text read, "Missed you last night. Can't wait for our next meeting. I'm still tasting you, babe." My stomach clenched. At first I thought, wrong number, right? Must be some poor schmuck accidentally messaging a random dude. But then came the kicker, a picture attachment. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen, but curiosity got the best of me. When the photo loaded, my blood ran cold. It wasn't a full face shot, just legs. But not just any legs. I'd recognize those long, tanned legs anywhere because they belonged to Claire. My Claire. For a moment, the kitchen noise faded away. The kids shouting, the clanking of cereal bowls. It all became a distant hum. My mind replayed the message over and over as if it was tattooed on the inside of my skull. "Missed you last night. I'm still tasting you." I shoved my phone into my pocket, hands trembling slightly as I returned to the task at hand, peeling oranges for the kids' lunch. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was an old photo she'd taken for me. Maybe the message was sent by mistake. Maybe, God, maybe I was just being paranoid. Claire breezed by me, coffee in hand, looking as radiant as ever. She kissed my cheek absent-mindedly, the same way she had for the last 12 years of marriage. I could still smell her lavender shampoo mixed with the faint scent of cinnamon from breakfast. "You okay, babe?" she asked, noticing the way I flinched at her touch. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired. Late night debugging at work." She nodded and gave me that warm smile, the one that always made me feel like the luckiest guy in the world. If I hadn't seen that text, I would have kissed her and forgotten about it. But now I was watching her closer. Every gesture, every glance, every movement. It all felt suspicious. Did she hesitate when she kissed me? Was her smile hiding something? Did the way she laughed with the kids feel forced? Or was it just my imagination running wild? As I drove the kids to school, my brain went into overdrive. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe Claire had some logical explanation for it. But a small voice inside me whispered, "What if it's not?" I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who obsesses over texts, who checks his wife's phone like some paranoid fool. But that picture, that text, and the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. When I got back home, Claire was already on her way to work. She left a note on the counter. "Dinner tonight? Miss you." I stared at those words, written in her familiar handwriting. They should have felt comforting, but they only added to the mess brewing in my mind. I grabbed my laptop and opened our phone plan account, something I hadn't done in years. The call logs revealed a number that appeared frequently, too frequently for it to be just a colleague or friend. And it wasn't listed under any saved contact. Suspicious. Just as I was about to call the number, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a new text, and the sender made my blood turn ice cold.
Greg Allen.
Claire's boss. The message. "Hope you're ready for tonight. Same place, same time. I'll bring the wine this time." And just like that, the walls of my perfect suburban life started to crumble. I stared at the message from Greg Allen for what felt like an eternity. My vision blurred, and for a moment, I wondered if I was dreaming, or having one of those nightmares where you wake up sweating, heart racing, only to realize it was all in your head. But no, this was real. Too real. I leaned back in my chair, the morning light filtering through the blinds, casting uneven stripes across my face. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't care. I was too busy replaying every moment from the past few months, searching for the signs I'd clearly missed. Was it that night she stayed late at the office? Or when she canceled our weekend plans because of an emergency meeting with her marketing team? How had I been so blind? I unlocked my phone again and reread the message. Same place, same time. I'll bring the wine this time. My stomach churned as I imagined them laughing over drinks, their legs tangled under a table while they whispered sweet nothings to each other. The idea of her with him, the smug, overly polished boss she occasionally complained about but never seemed to dislike, made me feel like I was going to throw up. I needed answers. Now, I didn't want to confront her, not yet. I needed more than a couple of cryptic texts before flipping the entire marriage table over. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I called Greg's number. It rang once, twice, and then voicemail. I hung up before it could go to the generic message. I didn't want him seeing my number pop up unexpectedly. My hands shook as I navigated to Claire's social media. She wasn't one to post much, but I thought I could at least spot something. A photo, a location tag, anything to give me a clue. But everything was normal. Happy family pictures, posts about her work events, photos of the kids at their swim meets. The picture-perfect life. But there was nothing perfect about the storm brewing beneath the surface. I rubbed my hands over my face, exhaling deeply as I stared out the window at our neatly trimmed lawn and the neighbor's golden retriever trotting across the yard. It was all so normal. But my life was anything but right now. Then it hit me, the hotel. Same place, same time. What if this wasn't the first time they'd met there? What if this meeting was part of some twisted routine they'd perfected while I was at home with the kids? None the wiser. I opened my laptop again and searched for local hotels near Claire's office. There were a few, but one caught my eye. The Palmer Hotel. A sleek, upscale place that marketed itself as the perfect retreat for professionals. A place where no one would raise an eyebrow if two coworkers booked a room. I didn't have proof she was staying there yet, but my gut told me I'd find something if I dug deep enough. I logged into our shared bank account, scrolling through transactions from the past few months. Everything seemed normal at first, grocery store purchases, utility payments, dinner dates. But then there it was, a $2,500 charge from the Palmer Hotel last month. My hand froze on the mouse. I clicked on the transaction details, hoping it was some kind of mistake. Maybe it was a business conference, or maybe she had a work-related reason for staying there. But the charge wasn't filed under work expenses. It was labeled under personal. Suddenly, memories came flooding back. Claire telling me she had to work late that week. Me making dinner for the kids alone, thinking I was being a good husband by letting her focus on her career. All lies. I slammed the laptop shut and stood up, pacing around the living room like a caged animal. The walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating me. My breathing was shallow, my pulse pounding like a drum in my ears. I grabbed my keys. If I stayed here any longer, I'd lose my mind. I needed air. I needed to get out of this house, away from the memories that now felt tainted. I drove aimlessly for a while, the world outside blurring as I tried to make sense of everything. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Was she planning to leave me? Or was I just some placeholder husband she'd use until she was ready to move on with Greg? The thought made my grip tighten on the steering wheel. Eventually, I ended up at a small cafe a few miles from home. I ordered a black coffee, strong enough to jolt me back to reality, and sat by the window, watching people go about their day as if the world wasn't crumbling beneath my feet. My phone buzzed again, and I nearly spilled my coffee. I grabbed it, hoping it wasn't another text from Greg or some unknown number. But it was Claire. Claire. Hey babe, meeting went well. Should be home around 6 tonight. Love you. I stared at the message, my fingers trembling over the keyboard. Love you. Did she even mean it anymore? Or was it just muscle memory? Something she said out of habit without feeling the weight behind the words? I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up a new tab on my phone and started searching for private investigators. If Claire was hiding something, I was going to find it. And when I did, there would be no going back. Couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Claire breathed softly beside me, oblivious to the storm raging inside my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of her, laughing at his jokes, running her fingers through his hair, whispering the same sweet nothings she used to say to me. I wanted to shake her awake, scream in her face, and demand answers. But I knew better. A confrontation without proof would only give her the upper hand. She'd deny it, gaslight me, make me feel like I was the crazy one. No, I needed to be patient. The next morning, I called the private investigator I'd found online. His name was David Larson, a former cop with a no-nonsense attitude and a voice that sounded like it belonged in an old detective movie. "How much do you want to know?" he asked after I explained my situation. "Everything," I replied without hesitation. "I want to know where she goes, who she's with, and what they're doing. I want pictures, videos, timestamps, anything you can get me." He agreed to start immediately, promising updates by the end of the week. I hung up, feeling both relieved and sick to my stomach. I was officially spying on my wife. How had it come to this? I went through the motions of my day, but everything felt surreal. I dropped the kids off at school, sat through a conference call at work without absorbing a word, and mindlessly scrolled through emails until it was time to pick them up. Claire texted me around noon. "Thinking of you. Can't wait for the weekend." I didn't reply. That evening, I watched her more closely than I ever had before. The way she moved around the kitchen, the way she smiled when our daughter told her a story about school, the way she kissed me goodnight like nothing was wrong. But something was wrong. I could feel it in the way her eyes didn't linger on me the way they used to. The next day, David called. "Got something for you," he said. I felt my heart drop. He explained that Claire had left work early that afternoon and driven to the Palmer Hotel. She met Greg Allen in the lobby. They didn't waste time. They checked in within minutes, hand in hand like a couple who had done this 1,000 times. David sent me the photos. My hands shook as I opened them. The first showed Claire standing by the hotel entrance, her hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail, her lips painted a shade of red I hadn't seen in years. The next photo showed Greg, looking way too smug for my liking, holding the door open for her as she laughed. The final photo was the worst. They were in the elevator, her body pressed against his, her face buried in his neck as he whispered something in her ear. I nearly threw my phone across the room. "Want me to keep following them?" David asked. "No," I croaked, barely able to get the word out. "I've seen enough." I ended the call and sat there, my head in my hands. I had the proof I needed, but instead of feeling relief, I felt like someone had ripped my heart out and stomped on it. Claire came home that evening as if nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek and asked how my day was. I smiled and lied, telling her it was fine, but inside I was a ticking time bomb. As we sat at the dinner table, the kids laughing and Claire telling stories about her day, I couldn't help but wonder how many more lies she'd fed me over the years. How long had she been sneaking around behind my back? Was I just the fool who kept the house running while she had her fun on the side? After the kids went to bed, Claire snuggled up next to me on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder. "I've missed this," she murmured, her fingers tracing lazy circles on my chest. I wanted to push her away, to scream at her for pretending everything was normal. But I didn't. I had to play the role of the oblivious husband just a little longer. That night, as she slept beside me, I made a plan. If she wanted to play games, I'd play too. But I wasn't going to lose. The first step was simple. I needed to catch them in the act. I spent the next few days carefully laying the groundwork. If I played this right, I wouldn't just confront her. I'd blow up her perfect little fantasy world. There would be no room for denial, no excuses, no chance to worm her way out of the truth. Claire had no idea what was coming. On Thursday morning, she kissed me goodbye as usual. "Don't forget about date night tomorrow," she said with a wink. I forced a smile. Wouldn't miss it. As soon as she was gone, I grabbed my phone and called David, the PI. "Friday night," I told him. "Follow her again. I'm betting she'll head back to the Palmer Hotel. Let me know as soon as you see them together." "You sure you want to do this?" David asked, his tone cautious. I hesitated for a second. Did I want to do this? Did I really want to destroy the life we'd built? To rip apart our marriage in one explosive confrontation? Yes. Yes, I did. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "Just be ready." The rest of the day crawled by, each minute stretching into an hour as I waited for the inevitable. That night, Claire was unusually affectionate. She curled up next to me on the couch, her head resting on my chest as we watched a movie. "I love you," she whispered, her voice soft and sweet. My throat tightened. For a brief moment, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the woman I fell in love with still existed somewhere inside her. But then I remembered the photos, the way she clung to Greg in that elevator, her body pressed against his like she belonged to him. I kissed her forehead, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I love you too," I lied. The next morning, Claire left for work as usual. I stayed home, pretending to catch up on paperwork, but my mind was elsewhere. I double-checked my plan, making sure every piece was in place. By 5 p.m., I got the text from David. "David, she's on the move," headed toward the hotel. I grabbed my jacket and keys, heart pounding as I made my way to the car. The drive felt like an eternity, my fingers tapping the steering wheel as I tried to stay calm. I didn't know how this would end, but I was ready to find out. When I arrived at the Palmer Hotel, I parked across the street and waited for David's signal. It wasn't long before my phone buzzed again. "David, room 512. They just checked in." This was it. The moment of truth. I crossed the street, my shoes pounding against the pavement like a drumbeat in my ears. The hotel lobby was elegant, with marble floors and soft lighting that felt far too serene for what was about to happen. I bypassed the front desk and headed straight for the elevator. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. As the elevator doors closed, I stared at my reflection in the mirrored walls. I barely recognized the man staring back. Eyes bloodshot, face tense, hands trembling. When the elevator dinged, I stepped out onto the 5th floor, my heart racing as I made my way to room 512. I stood outside the door for a moment, listening. Faint laughter and the clinking of glasses drifted through the door. I didn't knock. I didn't give them the chance to hide or cover their tracks. I pulled the spare key David had managed to get for me, slid it into the lock, and turned the handle. The door swung open. Claire was on the bed, straddling Greg, her dress already halfway off. The room reeked of perfume and cheap wine. They froze when they saw me, Claire's eyes widening in horror while Greg scrambled to cover himself. "Jack!" she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you?" "Don't!" I snapped, stepping inside and slamming the door behind me. "Don't you dare say a word." Greg stuttered. I didn't know." "Shut the fuck up," I barked, my eyes never leaving Claire. "I'm not here to talk to you." Claire's lip quivered, tears already streaming down her face. "It's not what it looks like," she choked out. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed off the walls. "Not what it looks like? Are you seriously pulling that cliché right now?" I pulled out my phone, showing her the photos David had sent me. "I know everything, Claire. I know this isn't the first time. So spare me the lies." She covered her mouth, sobbing uncontrollably. Greg sat there like a deer caught in headlights, too afraid to move. I felt the weight of years crashing down on me. Every late night she said she was working, every excuse, every kiss that meant nothing. And in that moment, I knew there was no saving us. "You should have just been honest," I said quietly. "We could have ended this like adults. But you chose this." I turned to leave, but before I stepped out the door, I looked back one last time. "Pack your things, Claire. When I get home, I want you gone." Her sobs followed me down the hallway as I made my way back to the elevator. My hands were steady now, the adrenaline fading as the reality of what I'd just done sank in. This was just the beginning. I drove around aimlessly for hours, replaying the scene in my head like some cruel, twisted movie on repeat. Claire's wide eyes, Greg's pathetic scramble to hide himself. It should have given me some satisfaction, but it didn't. If anything, it left me feeling hollow. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the sky had darkened, and the house sat quiet and still. My hands rested on the steering wheel for a moment as I gathered my breath. I knew what I was about to walk into. A half-empty home, memories scattered like broken glass on the floor, and Claire's absence echoing louder than her presence ever had. But when I stepped inside, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. I checked the living room first. Nothing. Then the kitchen, still nothing. The wine glasses from last night's dinner were in the sink, as if we hadn't just obliterated our lives today. Finally, I made my way upstairs to our bedroom. The closet door was open, and half the hangers were bare. Drawers were pulled out, some of them hanging crooked as if Claire had been in a rush to leave. I could still smell her perfume lingering in the air, jasmine and vanilla, the same scent she wore on our wedding day. I leaned against the doorframe, exhaling deeply. There it was, the suitcase she'd taken to the hotel. It sat near the bed, half packed with clothes, and for a moment, I thought maybe she hadn't gone through with it. Maybe she'd stayed behind, waiting for me to come home so we could talk. But when I turned around, my eyes landed on a folded piece of paper on the nightstand. Jack,
I'm sorry.
that's probably not what you want to hear, and I know it won't fix anything. But I am. I never meant for this to happen. I know that sounds hollow, but it's the truth. You weren't supposed to find out like this. I thought I had more time to figure out what I wanted, to fix things between us or at least give you the respect of a proper goodbye. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But for what it's worth, I did love you. I still do in some ways. Just not the way you need me to. I lost myself somewhere along the way, and instead of turning to you, I turned to someone else. Please take care of the kids. They need you. I'll stay with my sister for now, but I want to talk about the divorce, the house, custody. Whatever you need, I'll do it.
I'm sorry.
Claire. I crumpled the note in my hand, fury surging through me. She thought she had time? Time to what? Lie to me for a few more months, string me along while she fucked her boss in hotel rooms? I threw the note across the room, watching it bounce off the wall and land near her abandoned suitcase. My breathing was shallow, my chest rising and falling as if I'd just run a marathon. I wanted to burn every trace of her from this house. Her clothes, her makeup, the framed photos of us smiling at the beach like the perfect couple. But then I heard footsteps on the stairs, small and hesitant. Dad? My daughter whispered from the doorway. She was clutching a stuffed bear, her eyes puffy and red like she'd been crying. Is Mom gone? I swallowed hard, nodding as I knelt down to her level. Yeah, sweetie. She's gone for now. Is she coming back? I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, that this was just a temporary bump in the road. But I couldn't. I'd had enough of lies. I don't know, I said, brushing a tear from her cheek. But no matter what happens, I'm here. Always. She wrapped her arms around my neck, sobbing quietly into my shoulder. I held her tightly, my own tears threatening to spill over. I couldn't break down now. Not in front of her. Come on, I whispered, lifting her into my arms. Let's get you back to bed. Once she was tucked in, I sat on the edge of her bed, stroking her hair until her breathing slowed and she drifted off to sleep. I stayed there for a while, staring at the ceiling and wondering how the hell we were going to move forward from this. When I finally made my way back to the bedroom, I felt like a ghost in my own home. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through messages from friends and family offering support. But one message caught my attention. David, you good, man? Just checking in. I didn't know how to respond. Was I good? Not even close. I was barely holding it together. Me, thanks for everything. I'll let you know if I need anything else. As I set the phone down, a thought crept into my mind. One I hadn't considered until now.
Greg Allen.
The man who had helped destroy my marriage was probably sitting comfortably in his expensive condo, sipping wine without a care in the world. While I was here picking up the pieces, he was off living his life like nothing had happened. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Claire was out of my life, but Greg, he wasn't getting off that easy. The next morning, I woke up with one thing on my mind. Greg Allen needed to pay. Claire's betrayal had ripped my life apart, but he was just as responsible, if not more. He knew she was married. He knew what he was doing, and yet he didn't care. While I was home making sure the kids brushed their teeth and finished their homework, he was undressing my wife in a luxury hotel room. Not anymore. I sat in the kitchen, sipping a cup of black coffee, the bitterness fueling me. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made you realize how much space one person could leave behind. Claire's absence was everywhere. In the empty chair across from me, in the scent of her perfume that still clung to the cushions, in the wedding photo hanging above the fireplace that I hadn't yet taken down. I could wallow, I could cry, or I could get even. By noon, I had a plan. I wasn't just going to confront Greg. I was going to ruin him. First, I called David, the private investigator. "I need you to do one more thing," I said. "Anything," he replied. "What's the target?"
Greg Allen.
"I want everything on him. Affairs, financial dirt, anything I can use to hit him where it hurts." There was a pause on the other end. "You sure you want to go down this road?" "I've never been more sure," I said coldly. David sighed but agreed. "Give me a day or two." I didn't sit around waiting, though. I wasn't that patient. While David did his thing, I started mine. Step 1, his career. Greg worked at the same marketing firm as Claire, Mitchell, Price & Allen, one of the biggest firms in the city. But here's the thing about guys like Greg. They think they're untouchable. They think they can do whatever they want without consequences. I knew for a fact that wasn't true. I pulled up LinkedIn and found Greg's profile. Smug smile, tailored suit, a caption about leading dynamic teams to deliver innovative marketing solutions. What a joke. His innovative solution was sleeping with someone else's wife. But what really caught my eye was the list of clients he worked with, several high-profile companies, including a pharmaceutical giant that had zero tolerance for scandal. I smirked as I copied the contact info for their PR department. Step 2, his family. I knew Greg was married. Claire had mentioned his wife, Julia, in passing once or twice. She was the kind of woman who had no idea what her husband was up to, the type who probably thought they had a picture-perfect marriage just like I once did. I wasn't about to let her live in ignorance any longer. I found her Facebook profile easily enough. She had photos of their kids, family vacations, their dog, and, ironically, a few posts about how proud she was of Greg's work ethic. I wondered how proud she'd be when she found out about the hotel hookups. I composed a message.
Y Julia.
"I'm reaching out because I believe you deserve to know the truth. My name is Jack, and until recently I was happily married, until I discovered that your husband, Greg, was having an affair with my wife, Claire. I'm attaching some photos and messages that prove what I'm saying. I'm not doing this to hurt you, but you should know what's really going on." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Step 3, public exposure. I wasn't content with just destroying Greg's home life and career. No, I wanted him humiliated. So, I compiled everything, screenshots of texts between him and Claire, photos of them at the hotel, timestamps from their meetings. I uploaded it all to a folder labeled Greg Allen's Affair, then drafted an anonymous email to Mitchell, Price & Allen HR Department. Subject: Urgent, employee misconduct. Dear HR team, I thought you should be aware of a situation involving one of your senior employees, Greg Allen. Attached are files documenting his ongoing extramarital affair with a coworker. As a client-facing representative of your firm, his actions could damage your reputation. Please take the appropriate action. I attached the folder and hit send. Step 4, wait for the fireworks. That evening, as I sat on the porch with a beer in hand, the phone started blowing up. First, a text from David. "Jack, you're not going to believe this. Greg's been siphoning company funds. I've got the proof." I smiled. If HR didn't fire him for the affair, they'd definitely fire him for theft. Then, a message from Julia. "I don't know what to say. Thank you for telling me. I'm filing for divorce." Perfect. One more piece of Greg's world crumbling down. I was finishing my beer when Claire called. I let it ring for a moment before answering. "Hello." Her voice was shaky. "What did you do, Jack?" "I did what you didn't have the guts to do. Told the truth," I said. "Greg's wife called me," she sobbed. "His career is over. His family is ruined. You didn't have to do this." I laughed bitterly. "You think this is just about Greg? This is about you, Claire. You lied to me. You betrayed me. And now you're facing the consequences." "You've destroyed everything," she whispered. "No, Claire," I said, my voice cold. "You destroyed everything. I just made sure no one forgot it." I hung up before she could say another word. As I sat there, staring out at the darkening sky, I felt the weight of what I'd done settle on my shoulders. Revenge wasn't as sweet as I thought it would be. It didn't fix the broken pieces of my heart or erase the betrayal. But it did give me something I desperately needed, closure. And that was enough for now. The morning after the fallout, the air felt different. The tension that had strangled me for weeks had lifted, but in its place was a strange, hollow stillness. I wasn't sure if I'd won or just survived. I woke up early, showered, and made breakfast for the kids. Pancakes with extra syrup, our weekend tradition. My daughter came down first, her stuffed bear tucked under her arm, and sat quietly at the table. She didn't ask about Claire. She didn't need to. "Dad?" she whispered, pushing her plate aside after a few bites. "Is Mom coming back?" I paused, the spatula hovering over the pan. I hated that I didn't have a clean answer. "I don't think so, sweetheart," I said softly, sitting beside her. "But we'll be okay. I promise." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes before she buried her face in my chest. I held her tightly, stroking her hair and whispering reassurances I wasn't sure I believed myself. Once the kids were settled, I checked my phone. There were a few missed calls from Claire, but I wasn't ready to deal with her. Instead, I opened the text from David, the private investigator. "David, HR officially fired Greg. His accounts are frozen, and they're opening an internal investigation on the funds he stole. Thought you'd want to know." I chuckled, shaking my head. Greg had built his empire on charm and manipulation, and now it was crumbling beneath him. His wife was divorcing him, his career was over, and I had made sure everyone knew exactly why. "Me thanks, David. You've done enough. I think it's over now." For the first time in days, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Later that afternoon, I got another call from Claire. This time I answered. "Jack," she said, her voice raw. "Please, can we talk?" "We're talking," I replied flatly. "I'm not calling to beg," she said quickly. "I know it's over between us. I need to explain." I scoffed. "Explain what?" "How you lied to me for months. How you tore our family apart for some asshole who's now unemployed and broke." She was silent for a moment. "I didn't plan for this," she finally said. "It wasn't supposed to get this far. I was unhappy, Jack. I felt invisible. You were always working, and when you were home, you weren't really there. Greg made me feel wanted." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from exploding. "And instead of telling me how you felt, you let him crawl into our bed behind my back." "I know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I know I screwed up. But don't pretend you're blameless. Our marriage wasn't perfect, and you know it." "No marriage is perfect," I shot back. "But I was there, Claire. I was committed to you. You could have told me how you felt. We could have worked on it together. But you chose him." "I regret it," she said, tears evident in her voice. "I really do." I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the family photos on the fridge, the ones that felt like they belonged to another life. "Regret doesn't fix this, Claire. It doesn't undo what you've done." "I know," she said, "but I'm still their mother, Jack. Don't take that away from me." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. As much as I hated her for what she'd done, I couldn't punish the kids by cutting her out of their lives. "We'll figure something out," I said finally. "You can see them, but you're not stepping foot in this house again." "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." I ended the call, feeling drained but strangely at peace. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat on the porch with another beer. The stars were out, scattered across the sky like tiny beacons of hope. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to breathe without the weight of betrayal crushing my chest. The door creaked open behind me, and my neighbor, Tom, stepped out, holding a beer of his own. He nodded at me, taking the seat beside me without saying a word. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of crickets filling the void. Eventually, he spoke. Heard about Claire. I nodded, not surprised. In a neighborhood like ours, news traveled fast. You holding up okay? He asked. Yeah, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. It's been rough, but I think I'm getting through it. Tom took a swig of his beer, then glanced at me. You ever think about what's next? I laughed softly. Not really, just trying to survive right now. He nodded again, then clapped me on the back. You will, and when you're ready, you'll figure out the rest. We sat there for a little longer before he headed back home. I stayed outside, staring up at the stars and wondering what the rest would look like. But for the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid of it. Because if there's one thing I'd learned, it's that even when everything falls apart, you can still rebuild. And that's exactly what I intended to do.